After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus,
"Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah."
He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared, and a voice came from the cloud.
"This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him."
Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead.
Happy Valentine's Day, church. I put up a little decoration here so that you can see that we're celebrating here in my household. We have stacked on top of each other today 2 sort of holidays, 2 events. One, of course, you will have seen in the grocery store and any other place that you've been shopping, on the internet, all kinds of places. Valentine's Day is a thoroughly commercialized holiday that celebrates love, which is something that I feel like we can still celebrate even though Hallmark has essentially taken ownership of this holiday. And the other is the Feast of the Transfiguration, the last Sunday before the start of Lent, the turn of the liturgical season. And this is sort of a weighty moment, at least it seems like that to me, because Lent is the season we were in when the pandemic really came home to roost for us here. Of course, there were other people in the world who were experiencing it before Lent started, but for us, it was about halfway through Lent that everything ground to a halt, that the pandemic appeared in our daily lives. And so, at the eve of Lent again, at the eve of the second pandemic Lent, which in a way feels like a continuation of the first pandemic Lent, it feels perfect that we should celebrate both Valentine's Day and the Transfiguration. Now, we watched the story told amazingly this week of the Transfiguration of Jesus. This experience where Jesus and his friends went hiking. They went up a mountain, and suddenly Jesus seemed different. And suddenly he was shining. He was like nothing they'd ever seen. And suddenly their ancient ancestors in faith were with him, the prophets. And suddenly they didn't know what to do. And suddenly a voice from the clouds saying, "Listen to him." And then what does Jesus say in this story? Nothing. Other than don't tell anyone what happened here. It is a mysterious story. A strange story. A story that's a little hard to relate to. But when I think about it, particularly on top of Valentine's Day, I think about the times in my life when there has been a moment where everything clicked into place. A moment where suddenly I knew something that I didn't know before. I think about, for example, the moment very early that I knew that things with Cheryl were more than friends. I think about that moment. Now, Cheryl was the brave one. Cheryl was the one who told me first. And in that very moment, it was like the world turned on its axis, like everything was pointed a different direction, like everything I knew was different. I knew that I loved her, that there was something there. Now, that something there had been there before. I just didn't know it yet. It was growing and appearing and becoming itself before I knew it was there. I wonder if those of you who have been in love or who are in love can relate to that. If you can think back to that moment when you knew for the first time that there was love there. And for those of you who haven't been in love, or for those of you who don't experience romantic attraction, maybe there was a moment when you realized that you truly cherished one of your friends, that one of your friends was a better friend than you thought. Or maybe there was a moment when you learned something about yourself like that, when you realized you could do something that you didn't know you could do, when you realized your parents loved you more than you thought. There are so many of these moments. And what I think they have in common is that the thing you discover was true before you knew it. For falling in love, there really isn't one moment where you go from not loving the person to loving them. There really isn't, I don't think, one moment where everything changes. What changes is what you know. And I wonder if that's what happened for Jesus' friends. I don't know that there was a moment on that mountain where Jesus suddenly became holy. We know he was holy all along. He was God's Son all along. He was sacred. He was divine all along. His ministry was already ongoing at this point. He was already healing people. He was already challenging people. He was already telling parables to teach people about a new way. All those things were true. And so I wonder if stepping away from all the busyness of daily life, if his friends were able suddenly to recognize Jesus in a new way. I wonder if Jesus' friends all of a sudden realized something that had been true about Jesus all along. Their eyes, so to speak, were opened. I don't know about the details of this. I don't know whether Jesus truly began to shine like the sun, whether he truly became his clothes sparkling white, which I want to call attention to, especially in Black History Month, that this kind of thing has been used, like so many things, as an opportunity to uplift whiteness and to push down blackness. And I think that that is a total perversion of this story. And that at the time, whiteness was only really a stand-in for something impossible. They didn't have the kinds of bleach that we have now. They didn't have the ability to make things perfectly white. And so something that was miraculously brighter than anything could ever be bleached by the sun was just a stand-in for something that seemed impossible. I don't know if anything looked different on a molecular level about Jesus at that point. But what I do know is that Jesus remained himself. And that if he was accompanied by Moses and Elijah in that moment, they were with him all along, guiding his ministry and provoking him onward. If there were things that were miraculous about Jesus in that moment, they were miraculous about him all along. And suddenly, somehow, some way, his friends could see it. And they do what we all do when we suddenly recognize things as they are. They run around like chickens with their heads cut off. They try to do something. They say, maybe we should build a tent. Maybe we should put up 3 tents. Maybe we should stay right here in this perfect moment. Maybe we should stay right here in this mountaintop experience. Maybe we should just move in to this amazing moment where we recognize things as they are. And Jesus, of course, knows that they can't stay there. Jesus, of course, knows that we can never stay in that moment. We can't get anything done in that moment. That moment out of time when all of a sudden everything clicks into place and we are overjoyed by the recognition of love or change or ability or who knows, whatever it is that we're learning in that moment. It is singular and we cannot stay there. Jesus knows that. And what he says to his disciples, don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone until I have risen from the dead. We read this story at the beginning of Lent, and we're reminded right off the bat that Jesus knows where he's headed. And so do we. We know that things are still tough. We know that we have a long road to walk through Lent to Easter, through the rest of the pandemic to whatever comes next, through the way that the economy is, through our separation, through all of the challenges of this season, however long it is. And we also know with Jesus that when new information arrives for us, we can't really express it. It's one thing to recognize something new as it is, and it's another thing to try to figure out how to tell somebody else about it. How do you find words to say, I thought things were one way, but it turns out they were not. I understood us to be just friends, but it turns out, I don't know. We fit together like puzzle pieces. When our fingers touch, it's like electricity. It's like she knows what I'm going to say before I even say it, but I still want to say it because I cherish every moment of connection. Words fail us. Words fail us when we try to describe our love for each other. Words fail us when we try to describe these miracles when we recognize them. And words, I think, failed the disciples when they tried to describe what they knew about Jesus after that moment. There's no way to say it. We can only show it. So what I want to know is, what made it possible for them to recognize the new thing? What made it possible for that moment to occur for them? Was it the mountaintop, being removed from their daily life and all the other people around? Was it their company or lack thereof? Was it the weather? Was it something they ate or drank? Did they have an especially good sleep the night before or an especially bad one? One of the things I've been thinking about, I heard in a podcast recently, Tim Harford was talking about his new book, The Data Detective, and he was saying, you know, we want to find out what allows us to bridge polarization, which I know is a growing and ongoing concern for many of us in our congregation. What kind of things about us could help us talk to each other, could help us find a way to move forward as a community? What kinds of things could bridge gaps between people who are skeptical of vaccines, for example, and people who are ready to take them? or people who don't believe in climate change and people who are worried about climate change. And one of the things they said, he said he read a study, and the study had the hypothesis that scientific literacy was going to be a good factor, was going to help, that people who were more scientifically literate were going to be bridge builders, able to share information, able to help move forward. And the study, unfortunately, for so many scientifically literate folks around, said that scientific literacy actually doesn't make people more able to build bridges. But the study found something amazing. There is a factor that is easily identified that helps people build bridges. There's something that characterizes bridge builders and people that help bring new things together. And if you're wondering what it is, then that's good news, because it means you probably already have it. Because that factor is curiosity. The characteristic of curiosity helps people build bridges, helps people come close to other people who feel differently than them, and that closeness helps people change their minds. It helps bring us together. And it made me wonder whether curiosity wasn't perhaps the factor that helped the disciples take in a new thing, come to a new understanding. That it made me wonder whether curiosity could help explain the Transfiguration and how it was possible. Jesus, and following Jesus around, probably had been a master class in curiosity already for the disciples. All those parables, all those wonders, all those strange things had probably trained the disciples to be curious, to wonder what's coming next. And so, primed by those experiences, and removed from the hustle and bustle of their daily lives, as we have, so many of us have been over the course of the pandemic, removed in some way from our regular activities, and primed, hopefully, by the stories of Jesus, perhaps we are curious enough to learn something new. Perhaps we are curious enough to take in a new thing in a relationship, to learn something new about each other, something that was true already, but that we didn't know yet. Perhaps our curiosity will help lead us forward into whatever comes next. And so I pray for you this Lent that curiosity will be your guide, that your eyes and ears and heart will be open to what is true around you, and that God might show you things as they are, both more beautiful, more hopeful, and more connected than we even knew. Jesus is beckoning us with all those stories, beckoning us up and then down again, off of that mountain, strengthened and encouraged by new information, to walk forward towards Good Friday, but towards Easter too. May your Valentine's Day and your Lent be full of love and full of curiosity. Amen.